This is another episode from Ynglinga saga, written by the most famed of all Icelandic saga tellers, Snorri Sturluson, describing the lives of the legendary kings of Sweden and Norway. And, well, the first of these was no less than the god Frey, otherwise known as Yngvi, who came down to Midgard, the Middle Earth, in mortal form. He was the first to take the throne, the high seat, there in Uppsala, the capital of the kingdom of the Sveigde, or the Swedes, as they're otherwise known. And Frey, well, he was followed by his son, Fjolnir, of whom we have already heard. Fjolnir had a great liking for mead, but sadly, in the end, it was the death of him. Sad, but true. However, before he died, Fjolnir had a son, Sveigde. Now, Sveigde, well, he was a thoughtful man, and he pondered much upon the mysteries of the 9 worlds of the gods and goddesses, giants, elves, and dwarves. And he was fascinated, most of all, by the king of the gods, Odin, the one-eyed god of war and wisdom, of poetry and shamanism. Sveigde made a solemn vow in the name of Odin and all the gods that he would set forth out into the wide world in search of a means to reach the first world of Asgard, home of the Aesir, land of the most important tribe of gods. And so, having resolved to seek Asgard, or Godheim, as Sveigde called it, he began his travels, accompanied by 11 companions, and he ranged far and wide in Greater Svedjod, Greater Sweden, or Russia, as it is otherwise known, and also he roamed in the land of the Turks. And it was in these lands that he made many of his important connections. He conversed with wise men, with sages and philosophers. He sat with wizards, priests and priestesses, sorcerers and shaman. And finally, at long last, there in the depths of Russia, Sveigde and his party were camped one night, sitting by the fire outside their tents, when they heard a rumbling coming across the sky. And then there appeared a chariot drawn by 2 lynx, 2 of the great shy, elusive cats of the north. And this chariot bore no less a personage than Freya, whose name means lady, the goddess in charge of love, fertility, magic, the choosing of slain warriors, and their resurrection. Now Freya, of course, is the sister of Frey, or Yngvi, as he was known to the Swedes. Her name means lady in the same way his name means lord. They're the children of Njord, who lives in Njoarten, which means boatyard. And they, in fact, are members of the second tribe of gods, called the Vanir. And they reside in the second world, called Vanaheim, their home. And there it was that Sveigde was taken to see the second world of the Vanir, all of its wonders and marvels. And finally, they returned to the Middle-earth. And Freya, who by this time had assumed the name of Vanadis, or Vana for short, having taken mortal form for a while, she decided to become Sveigde's wife. And they retired to Uppsala, that fine old royal town, and they lived in the high gabled hall up on the hill. And it was there, in due time, that they had a child between them, a son named Vanlandi. Now, as the time went by, once more the wanderlust came upon Sveigde, and also his insatiable curiosity to reach the first world, and if he possibly could, to converse with Odin, king of the gods. So he set out once again with the same 11 companions. And he hadn't gone too far. He was journeying within his own realm in the land of Sweden itself. And he came to the east coast, where the cold blue waters of the Baltic lapped upon the shore. And it was the afternoon when they came upon a finely appointed hall called Stein, which means stone in the Old Norse language. And it was well named, for inside this hall there was a more ancient object, a great standing stone, far larger than the ones one might normally see, for this was the size of a house, and it was carved on one side with a great twisting serpent forming an arch with mystical runes along its length. And Sveigde and his party were welcomed by the owner of the hall. He called his servants to prepare a feast, and they were well entertained with mead, with ale, and imported wine. And this went down very well with Sveigde and his companions, because, not unlike his father, Fjolnir, Sveigde possessed a taste for strong liquor, and so the mead flowed freely down the gullets of he and his men. They had a fine time. However, all good things must come to an end, and the drinking session was nearly winding down, round about sunset, when the last light of the sun was streaming through the open door of the hall. And it was just then, when time itself was hovering on the boundary between day and night, when the last light of the sun fell upon the standing stone and the carved arching serpent inscribed upon it. And unseen by Sveigde and his entourage, suddenly the serpent, all of a piece, swung inwards upon unseen hinges, like a door set into the very stone. Sveigde and his men, by this time, they'd finished all the mead, beer and wine, and with some difficulty they got to their feet, and they were walking back down the length of the hall to find the spots where their beds had been prepared, where all the blankets were laid out and the bolsters for their heads and pillows, when they noticed the doorway in the stone. And there, sitting underneath it, was a dwarf, a dweorg. And this dwarf, he looked at King Swegde, and he said, "My lord king, noble scion of the Ynglinga line, if you wish to meet with Odin, come on in, and so you shall." Sveigde at once saw the dwarf, he heard his words, and began to run full speed toward the stone, his men hot on his heels. But because Sveigde was in the lead, he was the first man to reach the doorway set into the rock. He ran straight in without a second thought. And the last his men saw of him, well, it was the sight of the king falling down as if into a great chasm. And only an instant later, in less time than it takes to blink, the doorway slammed shut again. The dwarf, too, was gone. And there could be no doubt that that king had been taken far down beneath the earth, off to the 8th world, Nidavellir, the dark home of the dwarves, far underground, to a fate that can only be guessed at. And for now, that's the end of the tale of Swegde Fjolnesson. Thank you very much for listening, and wassail! Good health to you all.